My Lords, I rise to speak to the Amendment 30 in my name. This very amendment has been debated in the other House and was voted on and was voted down by 18 votes. And the government, I think, was quite shocked at the outcry, the public outcry, that this was going to be lost. EU law currently puts an obligation on the government and devolved administrations to pay full regard to the welfare requirements of animals when ministers are making decisions and implementing policies. This means that ministers have to think carefully about how their decisions might harm animals. The British government played a key role in making this very law during our term of the EU presidency. It has influenced over 20 pieces of EU law, including the ban on conventional battery cages for chickens and the ban on cosmetics testing on animals. Certain lobby groups are claiming now that protecting the animal sentience laws will be disastrous. For example, they're saying that farmers won't be able to control agricultural pests. They won't be able to go out and shoot pigeons. Now, this simply cannot be true. If it isn't the case with the law today, as it exists, then nothing will change tomorrow if we retain this law. The government's stated intention in the White Paper was for the Withdrawal Bill to bring all EU law into UK law and then only amend retained EU law in future legislation. I have raised this issue before, and I do find it rather offensive that the government would make a promise of that kind and then not honour the promise. Ministers have admitted that these animal protections will be lost as the bill is currently worded. I understand it's unfortunate to have to include single-issue amendments in this bill, but unless and until we're able to fix the bill to properly retain all EU law, I have little option but to propose this amendment. As a compromise in the other place when this amendment was proposed, the government said that a new bill would be created to include protections relating to animal sentience. The government will, I'm sure today, claim that my amendment is not needed because of this new bill that they're going to create. But the government's proposals are weaker than the EU law. The government has changed the wording in the draft bill and included a much broader list of exceptions. Ministers would only have to regard rather than have full regard for animal welfare. And there's a massive loophole where the minister can make decisions that are harmful to animal welfare whenever there are other matters of public interest. A legal opinion commissioned by Friends of the Earth concluded that the government's proposals make it far too easy for ministers to ignore animals, and their decisions would only be subject to legal challenge where they were so irrational that no reasonable authority could have come to them. I think that's a rather broad exception. The government's proposals do a very good job of appearing to protect animal rights while actually reducing them to near zero. The House of Commons Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee have looked at the government's draft animal sentience legislation and torn it to shreds. They've basically said that it should be removed from the rest of the animal welfare bill and kicked into the long grass. So it looks likely that, despite the government's best intentions, their draft legislation on animal sentience might never see the light of day, let alone reach the statute book. We need to keep this in the withdrawal bill. It's essential that we retain the existing provisions of EU law. We can't allow a gap in protections between Brexit Day and the point at which the government is able to provide a suitable animal protection bill. Government ministers have been telling various people that animal sentience is already protected in UK law and that we don't need my amendment. But if this is the case, why has the government drafted their own proposal on the issue? The situation is very simple. This protection doesn't exist in UK law, it stems from EU law. Without this amendment to retain Article 13, animals will lose these protections with only the vague hope that the government might one day bring forward a bill. Once retained, we can always go back to it and change it with a future bill. I'll be happy to work with the government to improve these animal protections, but in the meantime, my amendment will retain these animal protections once we leave the EU.
Noble Lady moving her amendment. Yes.